This part of ourselves feels heard, and it doesn't have to fight so much. And we also then can maybe find a little bit. We don't have to go, people don't necessarily want to go delving into their past. Some people do, and others don't. Yet, whatever's happening in the person's life right now will be being affected by what's happening in the present and what happened in the past. Sometimes we need to go into that through what's currently happening now, which is, nothing ever happens good for me. It doesn't matter how much passionate I get about it. I know it's going to fail, or I'm afraid it's going to fail. So we go in through that doorway and we give a voice to what's been hidden for so long. And then what happens is the affirmation has more space to work in a way, right? Because now when you look at the affirmation, you actually, more of you is on board with the positive power of this affirmation. As I mentioned, not everybody necessarily heard, but next week I am going to be going and spending a week with Joe Dispenza in Vancouver. He's doing an intensive. So I've created this thing called a mind movie. We all had to do it. And basically a mind movie is this: you pick pictures, you pick affirmations, and you pick the music. And then you watch this thing over and over again. And we got an email from one of our team leader, and she said that your mind movie needs to be almost like this beautiful dream that takes you on this journey. So I've been really working this thing, and it's filled with affirmations. The difference, though, is that when I can feel the affirmation, and the affirmation doesn't bring up a negative, then what's happening is there's more space for the affirmation to actually do the work that we're asking it to do. I know that's
inspiring
answer, but does that help?
I'm sorry, I just said that was inspiring.
Yeah.
That is inspiring.
Yeah. So, I don't use the word affirmation with my clients because I think there's a charge around that word. So maybe there's a charge around it for me more than anything. What I might more use with my clients, is okay, so how can we find a way to inspire this part of you? What would inspire this part of you? Where are you feeling passionate, and can you put a voice to what that passion is so that the client gets to have that experience? And at the same time, when I'm working with people, I am looking to see, okay, so is there an opposition? Is there another voice that I don't want to hear? Right? And it's the most amazing thing when you honor all parts of the person that's sitting in front of you, even the parts that feel like they're not welcome here. I have actually said to a client, I welcome the part of you that's really angry. I welcome her here. She doesn't have to come here. I just want her to know that she's welcome here. And if my timing is right, if the relationship is right, sometimes what happens is that when I'm speaking to that part through the client who's sitting there, the client can actually experience some type of oh my God, that felt so good, or she doesn't even want to talk to me and she's not sure if she believes you. What a catharsis that is. How amazing is that to be able to have that part honestly say, you're full of whatever. So now we're in relationship, right? Now we're having a relationship with this part that's different probably than they've ever had before. So it can be really, really a beautiful thing to do. So the gift of an affirmation is it can often bring up what you're not expecting, which is not exactly what you intended when you created it. But as the therapist, I'm going, yes.
Is this why you said yesterday that you actually like the word resistance? There's something to work with It's
Yeah.
I don't have that right exactly what you said,
Weird
but
about resistance. Sorry, go ahead. I interrupted you.
oh no, you were just answering my question.
Yeah, people get weird about the word resistance, or there's something wrong with me because I'm resisting, or it's a little bit like in hypnotherapy when people talk about an abreaction. I also think an abreaction is very healthy and wonderful, and it's telling me something. Resistance is telling me the same thing. You know, it's telling me that we need to slow down here. We need to just take a step back because something's happening. And if I don't notice there's something happening, and maybe I don't always, especially if the person isn't saying something, although oftentimes you can see things on the person's face. And that's one of the gifts of being a hypnotherapist is we talk about things like minimal cues, right? Minimal cues are basically just body language. You know, when you're working with a client, if a client is busy talking and you can see there's a stress on their face or their hands are moving or something's changed, it's a little bit more on the agitated scale than, 2 seconds ago, that's telling me something's emerging. That's, what is that? I can be curious about that. So resistance, I think, is wonderful. Or the client literally looks at me and says no. Okay, super, great. Say no. Yes. How many places can we say no? I don't want to do that. And people go, okay. Wow, tell me about that. There's a lot of energy in that no. So for me, when I'm working with a client, I endeavor, right? I endeavor to one, be aware of what's happening, and also to invite anything that appears. It doesn't matter what it is, as long as you don't break the wall or hit me, it's welcome. Anger is welcome. I have a set of chimes in my corner here. Those long chimes with the wooden thing on the bottom. And if I have a client scream in my room, this isn't a big room, right? What happens is the chimes actually start to move because of the energy of that screaming. And so I welcome even that. Because how many places do we have where we can actually scream? Where we can express something that's so deep inside of us? And it doesn't happen often, but it happens. Now what happens if a person says to me, I just feel like I want to scream, I'll say to them, you can scream here, just be aware that those chimes will go a little bit just so you don't get startled. And last time I said that, that's exactly what happened. It was like, oh my goodness, because it was a loud scream. So yeah, I welcome everything. And then what happens is that you've got more room for that, not only for the affirmation to come from a place that's more real and truthful, but there's a space for that affirmation to actually land on the heart with less resistance. Or less secret resistance. That's probably a better word. I don't think I've ever said that before. Less secret resistance. So we'll talk about this a lot. We'll talk about resistance. We will, as we go through, and especially as we go through and we do sessions and things like that, you'll get a chance to see me work with people, and you'll get a chance to see how, if that kind of thing emerges, how I can have a relationship with it.
I have a question which is not related.
Go ahead.
I was trying to find out, but it's so hard to do a research around hypnosis because so many sites appear weird or really don't. I'm not sure about the accuracy of information. And
Can I just get you to hold that for a sec? Angie, there seems to be a lot of noise coming from your system.
From my system?
No, not yours. I don't think it's yours because the yellow light was on in Angie's. Angie, can you just mute if you're not talking? That might help the feedback for the recording. Sorry, dear.
When I mute, it mutes you. Is there another mute?
Oh, okay. How about if let's see. So if you click on your picture, you put your cursor on your picture and you click There should be a little blue box that comes up that
Oh,
says
yeah,
mute.
mute.
Just read that one. Just do that one.
Okay, I'm in a room by myself. There's no other noise going on.
Okay, could be the feedback on your system, that's all. It's not there now, so maybe it's done. So just leave it then. I'll let you know if it comes back. Oh, okay.
Does it make a difference?
Yeah, let's see. We'll see if Tatiana talks if it comes back, okay?
Let's try me talking la la la, and it seems to be okay now. Huh?
La, la, la.
And especially when I tried to use not like hypnotherapy, but something related to, for example, my question is, what is clinical hypnotherapy actually? Because I can't seem to understand.
Well, clinical hypnotherapy is probably using it more for medical reasons, right? And I think in the States there are different titles for hypnotherapists. So a clinical hypnotherapist is probably a title that somebody's given. And in Canada, we don't tend to use that. If you see clinical hypnotherapist, I would say it's probably somebody using it more for a medical reason. It could be dental. You know, I would probably want to just go and look at that person's site to see what kind of work that they're doing.
I don't know if you know this Coastal Academy, which is based somewhere in Surrey.
Yeah, I checked those guys out before I found Orca, and you know, they're very direct, I think, their approach. So, are they using the term clinical?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so it's a title, right? It's a title, and it does sound kind of official when you think about it, you know, clinical hypnotherapy. So,
I thought you need to be a doctor or some kind of health professional to be clinical.
yeah, I don't know all the rules for all the different, but that would have been my thought too, because that's kind of where I was going with it, you know, that you needed to be, but maybe not. There are a lot less guidelines in Canada than there is in the US about counseling and hypnotherapy and all of these things. Down in the States, they have a lot more rules, you know.
Also different in different states, huh?
Yeah, exactly. Because I have a colleague who's in Portland, and there's many things that she cannot do that I can do.
It's difficult to figure out things when it's a mess. I mean,
well, you're going to be, like, are you looking for something else? Because you're going to actually be a counseling hypnotherapist. You will be able to put CH at the end of if you go all the way to the diploma. So that will give you some validity, right? And it will also, if you're part of the IACH, then you're also a member of the International Association of Counseling Hypnotherapy. So then you have something to put on your wall. And these things that we put on our wall are great because they ease the mind of the people that find that stuff really important. You know, I have only ever had one client that pinned me to the wall about my degrees. Nobody else ever even cares. And it's very important that we are part of some type of an association that has, you know, certainly some validity and a good background in the skills and the abilities of the people that they're allowing in the association. So the IACH does that, and the CPCA does that, not CPCA, the ACCT does that as well. So there are some good associations in Canada.
I just was wondering if clinical hypnotherapy is more aligned with what I'd like to do, like kind of health issues.
Well, that would be a wonderful thing to check out then, is if you find a school that is actually advertising that, maybe go and look at that. I would try to speak to some of the students as well, you know, because I did check out the Coastal Academy and it wasn't necessarily what I wanted, but that was a very long time ago. And it might have changed, and there may be some really good stuff that it's doing, you know.
I didn't find a lot of videos with this head teacher, so difficult to see. I found a video they made, like a promotional video in Mandarin. it seems like they're catering to Chinese students.
Well, that's actually kind of neat when you think about it, especially if they are offering courses that allowing the person to use their own language. I think
Yeah,
that's
I think they
wonderful.
offer courses.
Can you imagine teaching hypnotherapy, in Chinese and things like that? That'd be wonderful for people. I have a colleague who's from Colombia, and that was one of the big things that he struggled with coming to Canada, because in Colombia, he was a hypnotherapist, a very good hypnotherapist. And coming to Canada, he struggled with his accent. I didn't have a problem with his accent, but he struggled, So to be able to either work within your community, which can be a bit limited in Canada. How many people from, South America live in Canada that want to come to see a practitioner? So you're limiting your practice. But certainly in Vancouver, there's a large Chinese community, so that if you're learning in your own language, there may be great value to that, So that's kind of neat, actually. Or even Punjabi, or some of the other languages where we have a large culture in Vancouver. I'm just smiling because I'd love to hear somebody, do one of, let's say something that I do in that language. It would be so beautiful. It'd be fun.
I'm not even sure that I, at this moment, would be comfortable to do it in my language because I'm so used to do it in English, but I suppose it's not a problem if you...
Well, we had another student who was living in London, and she was Russian, and she worked a lot within her own community in London. And yeah, I mean, certainly there are probably some words that one would have to think about. The more technical words, you'd have to think about, how do I translate that?
Mm-hmm.
But for the most part, to tell a story, you could probably very easily tell a story in your own language.
Even more easily.
Exactly. The technical terms, those you might even have to just use the English word, right? Because what would be, the word in your language for abreaction? I don't know. You'd know that, I wouldn't. But, is there a word? So sometimes there isn't a translation, right?
And they're
Especially for something like that.
very often they're similar.
Exactly. So yeah, that's kind of fun. Okay, so let's look at the lay of the land today. What's going to happen today? Hey, Kaylee, welcome. I'm just going to check to see what happened with Kate, because she hasn't texted. Okay. All right, so what's going to happen? Tatiana wants to do what I will, but we do that right after lunch. Okay? Mm-hmm. So, my friends, in order for Tatiana to do a session on somebody, you don't have to, because please do not ever feel like you have to volunteer for anything. But she will need somebody to work with. And it needs to be something that's real, because she needs to be able to, it can't be something you're making up just to be nice to work with her. So if any of you have something that's real that you're willing to share with the rest of the group, okay, so please, you want to take care of yourself. You want to make sure that you're not sharing too much, because this is the first class for most of you. If nobody volunteers, then I will volunteer and she can work on me, which will probably scare the heck out of her, but that's fine.
That's okay.
Okay. So think about it for now. Nobody has to say anything at the moment, but just think about it for now. And before we go for lunch, we'll have this chat again. The other thing that I will say is that when we get to that part of the class today, I will turn the recording off, unless you guys really want it to be there. But to me, a session is very sacred, and I don't think we need to be recording it, because this is also part of Tatiana's grading, because I'm going to give her a grade for this. So having said all that, so after yesterday, in talking about that flow chart and what a session that includes some hypnotherapy will possibly look like, especially anybody got any questions about that? Because yesterday I did it more, so much general, but I certainly didn't go into the specifics of some of that stuff about how you do some of it. I did, certainly we spent quite a bit of time on counseling yesterday. I will spend time on counseling. I'll try to do that every weekend. You know, some weekends is going to be more than others. Other weekends are going to be mostly hypnotherapy, but counseling will always be there just a tiny bit, because it's very important to keep remembering that we are counseling hypnotherapists. So sometimes what's going to happen in a session is a person will phone and, you know, they'll make an appointment, and maybe they make the appointment to come in to work with you as a hypnotherapist, counseling hypnotherapist. They get here and you don't do any hypnotherapy at all. You just do counseling. Because once the person gets here, what unfolds is this deep need to talk, right? So just be aware of that. As a counseling hypnotherapist, you have no idea how a session is really going to unfold. But what I've given you with that framework is a little bit of an idea that this is what could possibly happen, and these are the points that you're going to want to gather and be present to in order to be able to do the counseling, and then move into the hypnotherapy, do the body of the hypnotherapy, which is really the story, or if it's not a story, because it's not always stories, the work that you do together, and then bring a client out of the trance. And that's basically what that flow chart's all about. So if you look at the chart, any questions? Any place you want to kind of start? First, we have
post-hypnotic suggestions, because still I kind of mix this term, and I don't understand if it's something you say during the trance or if it's something you say after the trance.
Right, exactly. Okay, so that's a great place to start then. All right. That's one of the reasons I actually do mark things down. Because when you're working with a client, one of the things that I want to be able to understand is what is the client longing for? What do they want? Right? Where do they want to move towards? What are they wanting to change? All of that, you know. So that sometimes what happens is that the post-hypnotic suggestion, which if we say post-hypnotic suggestion, then that is something that you're doing while the client is in trance. And I tend to leave it towards the end of the trance, because the client is in a deeper level of trance at that point. And having said that, you're speaking to the unconscious. So one of the gifts about Erickson is that he utilized the whole session. You can actually make a suggestion while the client's staring at you. For example, let me see if I can think of one. The client, you know, you're busy talking about, okay, you're talking about possibilities, and you're talking about doing something that's really hard. And the client has now just told you that 10 years ago, they went through something that was as hard or even harder than what they're doing right now. And they did manage to move through it or succeed or make the change or whatever it is they're wanting to do. So, you know, I'm busy sitting there and I'm finding that a way. And you could say something like, I'm wondering, you know, I'm just wondering how your unconscious mind is going to be able to take, no, not be able. I'm just wondering how your unconscious mind is going to take those skills and abilities from 10 years ago and bring them into this moment right now to help you. And then I just keep talking. That is a suggestion. And what's so powerful about that kind of a suggestion, when it comes spontaneously, is that what you're doing is you're speaking to the unconscious. And you've now made a suggestion that says, I'm wondering how. Not I'm wondering if, I'm wondering how. I see that a fait accompli. It's going to happen. So the unconscious is busy going, well, I wonder how I'm going to do that. That's so cool. So that's a suggestion.
I'm wondering how.
Sorry?
Sorry, what's the rest? I'm wondering how. The suggestion. Can you finish the sentence? I didn't get to finish writing it down. You said, I'm wondering how you're unconscious?
I'm wondering how your unconscious mind is going to take that experience and the skills and that you develop doing that and bring them into this right now to help you. Got it? I had to put my fingers in my mouth so I stopped talking so you could write it down. Oops, that's on the tape. So you notice I worded it differently the second time. When we're in the moment and we're doing this kind of work, oftentimes a client will say to me, what did you just say? And I'll go, I'm not sure.
Sorry, Diane, I apologize.
No, that's good. That's good.
You're
because
channeling your thoughts, that's why.
you're what?
You're channeling your thoughts.
Well, we're in the moment, right? That's what an uptime trance is. So if you don't remember what you said, please, that's a really good sign. No, that's great because, you know, it got me to think of another way of saying it, right? So post-hypnotic suggestions will happen while the client's in trance. Now, what Erickson used to do that was so much fun that I tried to do, and I really do that, is I actually make a conscious effort to do this, is that Erickson used to do things in threes, right? So if I'm making a suggestion, if I'm making a post-hypnotic suggestion, I will say it probably somewhere around the middle. I will say it a little further in, and I will say it before the client comes out of trance. So if I'm going to actually make a suggestion, and most of the time a post-hypnotic suggestion comes from the client's own words or a variation of the client's own words, because I don't have the right to suggest to my clients something that I think is good for them. What I look for is what the client's wanting out of this. Does that make sense? Yeah. So that's why I'm really listening. I'm listening to what they're telling me. I'm listening to what they're longing for. I'm listening to what feels impossible. There's a key there. I'm listening to what feels impossible that they would like to do. And then I might make a suggestion out of that. Okay, the feels impossible is to be able to become a non-smoker. Okay, that feels impossible. So the suggestions that I'm going to make through the session are going to be suggestions that move the client's unconscious awareness in the direction of becoming a non-smoker. That's because my client booked a session to become a non-smoker. So I feel that I can make those suggestions because that's what they want. Right? I'm not going to make a suggestion to the client to stop doing something because that's what I think they need to do. I'm going to make a suggestion that is more based on what they're asking me that they want to move towards. That's a very important distinction. And does that make sense to everybody? Yeah. We are all about honoring what this person wants, right? So what I call that kind of work is possibilities therapy. And possibilities hypnotherapy is that we are in the session, as much as I, talked this morning from Karen's question about shadow, is that now once we get into the hypnotherapy, I may create a story that has an element of shadow in it, meaning that it feels, and again, I'm using the client's words. If the client told me that this feels impossible and they just can't see any change coming on the horizon, I'm writing those ones down. And I'm going to weave that into whatever I'm creating. And then I'm also going to weave into there the possibility that they're moving towards, which is the change, which is to become a non-smoker, which is to feel free. And again, I'm pretending my client said it, to feel free and to be able to breathe, right? I just love to be able to breathe and have my clothes not stink. I don't know why suddenly it bothers me to smell. Great. I'm going to weave those because that's what they're wanting.
Would you say your clothes will not stink, or your clothes will smell good?
Very good question, and I'm going to have to think about that for a minute. No, you know what I might do, Tatiana? I might tell a story of somebody. Let's say I actually do a story. Okay, so I'm weaving this story and we're whatever. And I might have the person, and again, I'm just making it up. I might have the person sit on a log somewhere and be kind of looking out in the ocean and just suddenly become aware that, oh my goodness, that smell isn't there. I actually can smell the ocean. I have been so longing to be able to smell other things instead of the cigarette smoke. What a joy this is to smell this. So I'd really weave that in there if that was really important to my client, right? So then I would talk about the possibility and it already being happening, because that's what you're offering the unconscious, is this is possible and it's already happening. That's how I might do that. Only if it was really important to the client, because sometimes people will, and that's one of the questions in my smoking thing is, like, what are some of the reasons, the benefits to becoming a non-smoker, right? And if the client listed some of the things and they really emphasized that, I can hardly wait to be able to, to be able to walk into my house and not smell smoke all the time. Or my friends coming over to the house, I open the door and the first thing they say is, oh my God, it stinks in there. I'm so tired of that. Okay, now I've got something to work with. But whatever my client tells me, I'm just taking that in. Because if I'm going to create something in the hypnosis part of the session, I might be able to use it. So sometimes I have a sheet of 8.5 by 11 paper on a clipboard, and I might fill that sheet up with different things that I've decided to write down. I might use nothing on that page. And sometimes I use every bit of what's on that page. But I write it down because it's important to the client and there's a charge on the words, right? There's a charge on what they're telling me. Could be a negative charge. I might write it down because maybe I want to weave that somehow into the experience of the character in the story, a little bit, right? If it's something that they're wanting to move towards, I'm writing their language down because the unconscious mind loves to hear its own language. It loves to hear its own words. It listens more deeply when it hears something. Like when somebody uses the word wisdom for me, makes me just want to sing, right? I can actually feel myself when I'm in a trance. Oh, yeah, pay attention a bit more. So the unconscious loves to hear the words that it recognizes.
It's a funny thing. It's kind of the opposite of the counseling. I mean, in a sense, because when I read Skilled Helper and in general, this conversation back and forth between the counselor and the client is something like the counselor tends to put what client just said in his own words. You know, there is this tendency to rephrase and kind of to make the person feel that he's understood, kind of
That's
feedback.
empathy.
But
Yeah.
is this true?
Well, that would be empathy.
Yeah.
I'm not
And
sure about rephrase. I have to be careful. I have to be careful because I love language and I love language, right? So what happens is that I have to be careful that I use more of my clients' words than try to get creative with my own language. So when I hear the word rephrase, I have to be careful with that because it's not so much rephrasing what the client's saying, it's finding a way of saying it back to them that helps them to go deeper. That's what empathy is.
mhm.
Yeah. But why is that different than the hypnotherapy?
It's just this exercise from Skilled Helper that was aiming at kind of feeding back in your own words what the client just said. But in hypnotherapy, you really need to use the same words.
Oh, okay. Okay.
This moment.
Yeah. And I wonder, not that I want to put the skilled helper down, but I wonder if there's a little bit more room for actually using more of the client's wording and then just taking it. Because what empathy does is there's empathy, you can take the empathy just one step further than where the client is that might help the client to go deeper, as long as you're not too far ahead of the client. Because I've actually said things, if a client says to me, I have to think about this for a sec. Well, if a client said to me, that really feels impossible, and this sounds like it's a bit of a pipe dream to me. I get excited about this stuff, and then it just goes, part of me says it's going to crash and burn. I might say, that's the part that really believes that this isn't possible, isn't it? And that it will crash and burn. And that's probably not even that great at empathy, but it's an attempt to be present to what the client is saying. And I did try to use their language. Empathy is not something that I can plan. It's the weirdest thing. I have to be in a really relaxed state to do good empathy. That's why in the beginning I used to go back and read Carl Rogers just so I could get a sense of what he was saying. So I think there is more room to use more of the client's language. And the skilled helper is one person's approach, right? And then of course that's the model you're using. So yeah, that's fine. Just when you're watching Sheldon, listen to how he works, and when you're watching me, just listen to how I do what I do, and that will help you to be able to take your ability to use empathy and to be able to repeat back in a way that is more than repeating back. I think that's the bad rep that empathy has, is that people say, well, you're just repeating back what the client says. But if you watch Carl Rogers on that YouTube video, Carl Rogers is not just repeating back. It's absolutely powerful to watch that man work, because what happens is that every time he says something to her, she stops, she takes a breath almost, and then she goes in, and then she goes more deep with what she says to him, because he has such a skill in using the language that she's using in order to be able to help her to go more deep.
We watched it yesterday. I think there is also how he says things.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Not really words, maybe, but the all nonverbal communication.
That's beautiful. I love what you just said. That's exactly it, right? And that's one of the fascinating things. I know when I was in counseling school, the fellow that ended up being my supervisor for 2 years, he had such a library of videos of all of the different people that created the schools of therapy, like Carl Rogers and Fritz Perls and reality, the guy that does reality therapy and all of the different ones. And he had actually worked with some of them, right? So he had such a, oh my goodness. And what I noticed about, even though I didn't like certain schools of therapy, like the reality therapy guy just made me so edgy because I didn't like how he was working. But what was so powerful about these people is that they weren't trying to be Carl Rogers. He is Carl Rogers, right? So he's not trying to do person-centered therapy. He is person-centered therapy. So he's just being who he is. And that's what people try to emulate. It's like watching Erickson. Erickson doesn't have to try to be an Ericksonian hypnotherapist. He is Erickson. So when we're learning this, we need to, yes, go through that stage of trying to be whoever we really like, Milton Erickson. And then we need to integrate it into who we are. Because I've seen you work, and you are really good. So you're integrating all of the things that you're learning because you have such an amazing capacity to learn, that what's going to eventually happen once you start to do this more and more often is you're going to create the Tatiana School of Hypnotherapy inside of you. And nobody else is going to be able to do it like you do. And that's going to be your greatest gift. The difference is, then you're going to need to go out into the world and start, the Tatiana School of Hypnotherapy. And people will start talking about you like they're talking about Carl Rogers.
Including Russian courses.
There you go, including Russian courses. Right? Because that's what we're all doing, is we're all creating our own therapy, model of working, as we mix all of the richness of who we are and what we bring to it. So now you've created this amazing practice where people come because you do all the things you do, right? So, but in the meantime, we're busy studying Carl Rogers and going, well, how can I do that? Well, we're not going to do it exactly like that because of what you exactly said. He brings his whole being to it. But I'll find my way of doing it. I remember leaving, when I was working with Sheldon studying this, just like you are. I can remember driving home, from the West End, and I live a little ways from the West End, thinking, oh my God, I want to do that. I don't want to be Sheldon, but I want to be able to do that like that. I want to be Diane doing that like that. And then all of a sudden it was just like, oh my God, I have a hypnosis voice. Where did that come from? What a cool day that was. Oh my God. I don't sound like Sheldon, but I sound like me, a little bit like Sheldon. And that felt so cool, right? And you've probably already experienced that because you've been practicing. And you all will get that wonderful day where suddenly you have a hypnosis voice. And you're going like this, doing the happy dance.
Diana, can I ask you something? Many years ago, I went to see a counselor, and it was just counseling, no hypnotherapy, but he repeated everything I said, and I found it so annoying.
As a matter of fact, I was watching Harry Potter the other night, and Harry Potter does that a lot too. Did you say anything?
Oh, heavens no, because he's got the education and I didn't, so I just felt annoyed and didn't go back.
Yeah, I'm sure that we all do that, some version of that, right? I'm sure I have clients that go, oh my God, if she uses the word beautiful or wonder one more time, I'm out of here. Yeah, so
So I'm sure, like, maybe repeating somebody's words back to them will work for some people, but some people like me will find it really annoying. What's the clue?
the clue
What
is
what was
repeated, you're not repeating back. That's the clue. Because when we first start to play with empathy, we do feel like we're repeating back because we're trying to figure out how to do it, right? You will notice that with Sheldon does something that's kind of fun. And the only reason I noticed it is because for the diploma class, I transcribed every single session he did, not the basic, but the diploma one. I created scripts so that people would have access to the scripts. So I started to notice what he was doing. Sheldon takes elements, whatever I think has the most charge, and he'll repeat that back to the client. But he's not repeating everything the client says. And it's
okay?
quite neat if you watch him do that. So I'm not sure what this guy was doing, if he was experimenting with empathy or this is what he decided empathy was. But yeah, so that's probably going to make you slightly more sensitive to the whole empathy thing, right? You're going to need to find your unique way of doing that because it bothered you, right? And that's not what empathy is. Empathy is not repeating it back. Empathy is allowing the client to hear what they have just said, which gets the attention of a part of them. And they either say, no, it's not that, it's this, or they say yes, and then they go deeper.
Okay.
That's, if you watch Carl Rogers, that's what that woman does, is she takes what he says to her, and I love it when a client goes, no, it's not that, it's this, because what's happened is in a way the client's gone deeper into their experience and clarified it probably more for themselves. And I think that's what part of what empathy is doing, is empathy is giving the client a chance to clarify and understand more of what they're talking about.
Right.
You know? So to repeat back what the person has said, unless you've got a really amazing style, I would probably find it annoying as well.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And that's why reading on becoming a person is a beautiful thing. There's a section in there on empathy, and certainly watching those videos. You know, I never read the whole book. I just would go to that empathy section. You know, so it's well worth it. It's really well worth it reading it because you get a little bit more of an idea, and it's really powerful watching him work. But just like anybody, you know, I would probably want to watch that video a lot to really get the nuances, as Tatiana's pointing out, the nuances of what he's doing. You know.
Okay.
Even the cognitive behavioral, you know, I like aspects of cognitive behavioral therapy. And if you watch the fellow that created it, I don't remember his name, but if you watch him work, it's quite amazing because this is how this person works. So they've created this whole way of being in relationship with clients that's quite magical. And it would drive me batty to do that for a whole session because that's just not my style. But it's his style. And it's beautiful to watch because even though it's cognitive behavioral, so it's much more, you know, head oriented, he has such a beautiful presence, which is what Tatiana was pointing out. He has such a beautiful presence in relationship to his clients that he's taken this style and he's also in relationship. And that's the key. Maybe what happened, and I don't know, right? I mean, I don't know what this fellow was doing, but maybe what was happening there is that there wasn't quite enough relationship for you so that it wasn't working. because the relationship is very key. That's what rapport is.
Yeah.
When we come into relationship with our client, we're building rapport, right? So when a client first comes into my office and sits, whether they sit on the edge of my love seat or whether they sit back and they look like they're relaxed, you know, I will often, if they don't start talking right away, I will often, you know, give them a minute or so. I might say to the person, yeah, you know, just kind of take a moment and get used to the room, you know. And I don't say that to everybody, but it's just the right thing to say to some people, you know, because the person doesn't know how to start or needs to take that deep breath. So now I'm building rapport, right? I'm building rapport. And I'm building rapport basically from the moment we have a conversation. So it's just like when you answer the phone. Okay, so you pick, your phone rings, you pick it up, and it's your office number, right? You pick it up and you go, Diane Auld. Oh, that's such a not good thing to do. Right? I've just now given you the big impression that I'm either really nervous or you're bothering me. So everything is building rapport. Right? We need to be aware of everything. I don't answer my phone when I'm in, you know, in the real Canadian superstore, or even my car for that matter. I let it go to voicemail. Right. So
well, I have to say,
constantly.
There is absolutely no rapport with this guy, and I don't know whether he was maybe just new at this. I don't know. But
you know, I mean, certainly I can think of a few clients that I would like to say, I'm different now. Come on back. Yeah. I'm so different now.
Right.
You know. So did I answer your question, Tatiana, about the post-hypnotic suggestions? Is she thinking? What is she doing? I can't hear you.
Hello.
Oh, there you go. So did I answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, excellent. All right. All right. So let's go back to the let's go back to that thing that I can't seem to find on my iPad. That elusive little puppy that we were looking at yesterday. The flow chart. Where are you, flow chart, for crying out loud? Why aren't you here? I found it. All right. So yesterday when we did the trance training part, normally trance training only happens the first session, okay? You're not going to do trance training every time a client comes in. You're only really going to do it the first time, and you're doing it because you want to see, as I said yesterday, how a client moves into trance, right? Do they go in quickly? Do they have a very active mind? So your induction needs to be a little bit longer. You know, do they, the minute you start to talk, close their eyes and they're gone? I had a client, I've told the gang about this before. He used to come every Friday, and he would sit on my couch and he would process his dreams. The guy used to get up at 2 in the morning and write his dreams down. Wow. And once we'd process the dreams, I said to him, would you like to do a little bit of hypnotherapy? And he would be like, wait for me. He would just boom and he's gone. I didn't even have to say anything. Said, wait a minute.
Well, after getting up at 2 a.m., writing your dreams.
That's right. He was tired. Is that what you're saying? He used to bring reams of little, you know, real estate pads, and he'd have all these written on them. It was just inspiring. So sometimes that happens, but that's what you're trying to find out. The very first time is, how does this person do trance? And the other thing that I wanted to mention that I didn't mention about the value of trance training, which is kind of a funny term, but a value of that is for the person who doesn't believe they can go into trance. Trance training is another beautiful way of showing somebody that they are very capable of going into a relaxed state that happens to be called trance. And we want to be slightly careful of our languaging around that. I'm not putting a person into trance. I am not doing hypnosis on a person. I am not putting a person into a hypnotic trance. I am facilitating a relaxed state through language and relationship. The client actually is doing all the work, right? They're the one breathing. They're the one closing their eyes, potentially. They're the one relaxing into the couch, and my voice and what I'm saying is helping them to do that. That's all that's going on. There's skill, right? Because part of the skill is I'm noticing something called minimal cues. And basically what minimal cues are, just as I said before, they're kind of body language. So, person sitting in front of you, their eyes are wide open, they're breathing, you have been talking for a few minutes, you're doing an induction, which I'll talk about at some point, either today or next month. And they're staring at you. Nothing seems to be changing, although they have stopped blinking. That's interesting. What's going on over there, I'm thinking. Those are all minimal cues. Right? I had a client, wasn't a client, it was a student. I had a student who I'd never met before. This was her very first time. I was showing them something, and she stared at me with her eyes wide open through the whole hypnosis session. And I had never experienced that before or since. And suddenly I had to go, oh my God, she's actually in trance. She's in a, an altered state. And she just happens to do it with her eyes wide open. So I'm looking to see what's changing. Has their breathing changed? Has their face softened? That often happens when a person moves into a trance state. So that's a minimal cue. If the person's, maybe their foot was moving a little bit because they were a little bit nervous, or that's just something they do, or their hands were moving and now suddenly that stopped, that's a minimal cue. Were their eyes open and now their eyes are closed? That's a minimal cue. It's all telling you something. Has the person's breathing changed? Right? Maybe I was breathing normally and now I seem to be taking longer breaths. You do not have to notice the vein in a person's neck. You'll hear somebody talk about Erickson around that. I do not notice veins in people's necks, believe me. That's not something I do. But you will be able to see that all of a sudden, like yesterday when we did that in the afternoon, I could see that everybody was in a relaxed state, except for Kaylee, because I didn't see her video, right? But for all of you that had your video on, I could see you all go into your own nice, lovely, relaxed state. And it was very easy to see, because you all closed your eyes, you all rested more deeply into whatever you were sitting on, whether it was a couch or a chair. Some of you put your head back a little bit more. Nobody except Teresa, at the end when I had already brought some people out, opened their eyes. So your eyes are all closed, but Teresa opened her eyes and then she closed them and went back in. So she did her own fractionation. That's another word you're going to hear. She brought herself out a little bit to open her eyes and then she took herself back in. Right? Those are all cues as to what's going on. So minimal cues will tell you whether a person is moving more deeply into a different level of trance, right? Whether it's beta, whether it's alpha, they're getting more relaxed. Whether it's theta, they're getting even more relaxed. Or if it's delta, then they're probably darn close to being asleep. So in the manual that you have, there's a little section on brainwaves, right? So right now, if any of you are feeling kind of relaxed, you're probably, at the top of an alpha state. As you get more relaxed, you'll move down through alpha. If you had your eyes closed and like you did yesterday, and you were probably had been in trance a little bit longer, you might actually be in theta. Theta is a little bit more dreamy, right? You're a little bit less aware of what's around you, although you're still very there. You're still probably hearing my voice, although that will drift in and out more. Certainly if you were in theta, that would drift in and out more. Because the conscious mind kind of goes off and it comes back. And it's when the conscious mind sort of comes back that you're actually going to remember things, right? And that's what happens in a past life regression, because you're talking so much. Even though you're very deep at another level, there is another level that is aware enough to be able to talk, right? And I work with clients like that too, not doing past life regression. I do hypnotherapy sessions like that, and I will hopefully get a chance to show you how to do that. It's really, I love that kind of work. So I don't use stories all the time. I do that kind of work as well, where the client is constantly communicating to me. And that's kind of, Noella asked a bit of a question about that yesterday. Should I ask the client? And I sort of said yesterday, well, I don't know. I might not, or I might. You won't know unless you're actually deciding that's how you're going to work. Or sometimes I don't know what's going on for a client, but I know something's going on, and I will ask them a question. And that's what Noelle was alluding to yesterday. Right? So we are so capable of being able to do so many things, and you will be able to see a lot from what's happening in a person's body language, although you will not know exactly what they're experiencing, right? All you'll know is they are in a trance or not, right? I remember I had this doctor that I worked with, and she was actually going to have one of her lungs removed. And she called me up. This was right at the beginning. She called me up and she wanted some hypnotherapy around this whole procedure that was happening for her. So I went out to her place out near UBC. And this woman had an incredibly active mind. She was a doctor. She had a practice. She had all these things. She was going in for surgery. There was so much happening. And I'm telling you, I really had to ground myself to be able to, to work with her, because I felt, wow, this is serious stuff here. So this person, the minimal cues that she was offering me was that she's going to take a little bit longer to move into a relaxed state, because she's not feeling very relaxed right now. So great. I now can see that I need to slow down. I need to speed up, because I'm going too slow, and she's not on the carpet with me. I'm busy on the relaxed carpet, and she's up here on the hyper carpet. So maybe I need to speed up how I'm speaking to be more in line with her level of activity that's going on in her mind. And then as I start to speak, slowly start to change my pacing. So now I'm engaging her through whatever I'm saying. I'm absorbing her enough so that she comes onto the magic carpet and we're on there together. And now together we're going. So this is me. She's doing this and I'm following her lead because of her active mind. I'm not busy going on saying, okay, you need to be relaxed. I'm willing to be up there where she is really active and then go at the pace that she can go at. Through language, through what I'm saying, through my pacing, through my tone, through all those things that Tatiana was alluding to around, what she saw Carl Rogers doing yesterday. He was using his old being to be in relationship with wherever his clients are. And that's what we do. That makes sense?
Yes. I haven't figured out how to do it yet, but yes, it makes sense.
Absolutely, absolutely. And that's what we are going to talk about, pacing and tone and all that kind of stuff. And you'll get a chance to see that. So what I'm thinking for today as well is I'm thinking that if you want, after Tatiana does hers, maybe sometime this afternoon towards the end of the day, is that I do a session on somebody, just so that everybody can see what it's like to do it from the beginning, the middle, and the end, okay? And no guarantees. The same with Tatiana. We have no guarantee what's going to unfold in a session because it's not planning and plotting it. Now, Tatiana's doing this for school, so she may have a little bit of an idea, but she has no idea what actually is going to happen as I do, right? So we'll just, that's another thing you'll get a chance to see, is you'll get a chance to see us take our skills, wherever we are, whatever level we are, and use it in relationship to the person that we're working with, and see how that unfolds, right? Because right now, there's what, 7, 8 people here? Well, if we were all going to work with the same person, we would all do it differently. Because of who we are, because of our skill levels, because of how we think, because of what we hear, because of what we resonate with, all of that. So, I think we need to take a little bit of a break because Angie's cold looks like it's getting... I'm going to pause this goofy thing here. Please somebody remind me. There we go. Look at that. The Ericksonian approach considers hypnotic inductions as interactional sequences that absorb and direct a person's attention into a therapeutic, utilizable, altered state of consciousness. Somebody's moving around quite a bit. So if you have a bunch of noise going on in the back, could you just mute your line?
Oh, I'm sorry, that might be my daughter in the kitchen. Pardon me.
Okay, thanks, dear.
Yeah, no worries.
Sequences that absorb and direct a person's attention into a therapeutic, utilizable, altered state of consciousness. In this general framework, the critical factor in inducing trance is not the subject's responsiveness to hypnotic directives, but rather the hypnotist's willingness and ability to accept and utilize the subject's reality. This sometimes necessitates unorthodox strategies and communications. It invariably requires ongoing flexibility. So, it is my ability to dance with you. Because if I am directing you to go into trance, it means you have to do what I'm saying. Well, we're not. We're Ericksonian hypnotherapists. We tend to side on the more of indirectness. So what I'm doing is I'm watching your minimal cues. I'm watching what's happening to you. And I am, with the skills that I have learned, you're now in charge of that magic carpet. You're now the one driving, and I am actually not entirely following you, but I'm certainly, if this is you and this is me, I am just a tiny little bit ahead of you with my tone, with my pacing, with what I'm saying, that is watching to see when you start to change your state and start to get a little bit more relaxed and move inward. So I have to have the flexibility. So I'm going to read that again. It sometimes necessitates unorthodox strategies and communications. It invariably requires ongoing flexibility. So it's my willingness to be flexible to your experience and use the skills that I've learned in order to be able to facilitate a relaxed state for you to move into. So for me, this is my definition of an induction. An induction is a lovely dance between a client and hypnotherapist. A dance that involves being in the moment with what's happening for your client to assist in facilitating a focus, a way inward. It becomes a vehicle offering a ride to the client's body and minds for relaxation, a deepening of that relaxation for trance, and a deepening of that trance for therapeutic purposes. It's a way inward. An induction is a lovely dance between client and hypnotherapist. A dance that involves being in the moment with what's happening for your client to assist in facilitating a focus, a way inward. It becomes the vehicle offering a ride to the client's body and mind for relaxation, a deepening of that relaxation for trance, and a deepening of that trance for therapeutic purposes. It's a way inward. That's all we're doing. And we do that by listening and watching and being aware. And our voice, so tone, pacing, awareness on my part, flexibility, as Stephen Gilligan mentioned. He also mentioned, which was wonderful, he mentions it sometimes necessitates unorthodox strategies and communications. If it's taking a little longer for my client to go in, I may have to get a little creative with what I'm saying. Because we've been talking about creativity. So, ordinary trance induction is based upon securing from the client some form of initial acceptance and cooperation with the hypnotherapist. That's really what it's all about. And you already kind of have that in a way, unless something's emerging, unless some resistance is emerging. Because if I say to a client, would you like to do a little bit of trance work? And the client says, yes, you've got permission. So that's initial acceptance. Potentially there's cooperation, unless what happens is the minute the client starts to relax, something that doesn't want the client to relax emerges in that moment. And now we have something different happening, which I need to notice, or not. The client just goes, great, this is perfect. This is what I'm wanting, and I'm going to go inside. Right? So there is that cooperation with me and acceptance of, yeah, we're going to do this. So inductions can be verbal, they can be visual, they can be kinesthetic. We tend to use more verbal ones. I don't use the kinesthetic ones. We can use visual ones. Kinesthetic would be meaning probably touching the client somehow. That's a little bit more NLP. It's not something that I do, but Erickson used to have a handshake one. You know, there are ways that people can move into a trance state. And even sometimes they are totally unnecessary, right? The client, the client that I had, the induction was, would you like to do a little bit of trance work? And he went, yes. And he went off on his own little journey. I didn't have to say a whole heck of a lot of words. He already knew the cue to go inward. That's what he created with himself. This is my cue to go, or I'm gone, right? So sometimes it's unnecessary because a client puts himself into trance. You know, they either have a personal process of doing that, or my voice will do it. I have a story about that, which I've shared with the rest of the group, is that before I started with Sheldon, I used to listen to Lee Poulos. He's an amazing man, and he's a local Vancouver guy who has had a practice for eons. And he had tons of tapes and things out there, and I used to listen to them. And one time I went out to UBC and I took a course with him. It was a weekend course, right? And Lee Poulos is very eclectic, so it was some kind of weird, dreamy, cool course. And he had us doing this intuitive stuff, and it was really fun. And then at one point in the weekend, he did a hypnosis session with the whole group. And he started that hypnosis session exactly the same way he started every single CD that I had or tape that I had. So the minute Lee started talking, I just went, oh my God. And boom, I was gone because I had listened to so many of his tapes that was the induction. So you don't have to have a different induction every time if you have one you like. Because sometimes the induction can be the most comforting, reassuring, safe thing for a client because it's something they recognize. Just putting that out there. You can change it all the time you want. You can be really creative and do it different. And we always do it slightly differently anyways. But he did it exactly the same words every time. It was just, at first I smiled and then I was gone. You know? All right. So let's talk a little bit about some of the differences, the different ones. Let's say for visual. A visual induction would be one where you maybe take the corner of a painting. I have lots of paintings in my office, so I have lots of frames. I don't use this induction because it isn't particularly one of my favorite ones, but it does work. You can use the corner of a painting. You could even use the whole painting. But what you're doing is you're focusing a client's attention on either a spot, it's called a spot induction, or you're focusing on something in the room. Now, the supervisor that I mentioned, his name was Mahmoud, and Mahmoud actually was one of the people that started Orca with Sheldon right at the beginning. So Mahmoud is one of the most amazing hypnotherapists. I just love him to bits. And I remember sitting, when I was at counseling school, I remember sitting, waiting for him to finish with, so the door was closed, and with somebody, and I was either going in next to talk to him or something, and I'm sitting there. And of course, he had quite a sense of humor. And he walked out of the room, and there was a clock on the wall over there, and I was looking at the clock, and he started doing this thing about talking about the clock and talking about time and watching the clock. And the little character was putting me into a trance. Right? Because he was using his voice, he was using this thing, my absorption, because I happened to be looking at the clock when he opened the door, and he just started doing this thing, which was a bit of a fun thing for him. And, you know, because we did that kind of stuff. So you can use anything. I have a really cool painting behind me where my clients, you know, they're looking at me, and if they look up, they're looking at the painting. And oftentimes, if I notice a client staring at the painting, I might say to the person, what is it that you're staring at right now? What are you seeing? And what I have is I have this painting. It's a James Christensen painting that I absolutely love. And it's a boat floating in the middle of the sky. And there's a king and a princess and a mouse and a bunch of musicians in this boat. So there's a lot to look at. And if somebody says to me, well, I'm staring at that mouse, what's he holding? Yeah, just allow yourself to stare at the mouse and be aware of that mouse sitting in what's it called, the nest that's at the top of a ship, and the color of the mouse, and the instrument is holding with the flag that's coming out of it. So my voice starts to change, right? And the person starts to breathe a little differently. And now, because they were already absorbed in that, they're absorbed in it a little more. So you can use anything if you like that kind of induction. And when the person starts to close their eyes, you know they're moving inward. Or you start to see kind of you know, sort of the eyes start to close and then they open, and then they kind of start to close and then they open. You know something's happening. And then you can very gently say, and we really can close our eyes when we need to, and when the time is right, can't we? And then probably what's going to happen is the client's going to close her eyes. So anything can be used to induce, to facilitate a trance state. If we look at it, does everybody have a picture frame that they can look at right now? Something that's got a corner on it?
Yeah.
Some of you might have to turn around. I can see pictures behind you. I just can't see pictures in front of you. Now, the thing about a spot induction is that it's a little bit more direct. Okay? It's not really super indirect. Because whenever I do this, I think, how can I make it indirect? Have you ever thought about a picture frame? Watching the corners of the frame come together and how tightly that they fit. And allowing one's eyes to follow the frame as it moves down and across the picture. And that spot that's on the very edge, the very point of the frame. That's a pivotal point for the whole frame. If one focuses one's attention to that point and allows oneself to breathe and to become aware of the point and how important that point is for this moment in time, not just for the picture or the frame, but possibly for you. And as you watch, and as you breathe, and as you allow yourself to become more aware of possibly an internal process, you might just find that maybe there might be permission to allow your breath to close your eyes. And allow yourself to just be aware of this breath and the next. Knowing that your unconscious mind in this moment is going to use this moment to help you with something very important to you. So the unconscious has the ability to realize this time and the next time in a way that is beneficial for you, for your life, for all the things that are important to you. So as your conscious mind listens to my voice and drifts off and comes back, it becomes part of the journey as well. So the conscious mind and the unconscious mind work together in a beautiful partnership, allowing you to do what you need to do in this moment. And with each breath, we offer the unconscious the space and the time so taking all the time you need to allow your unconscious to complete and to integrate. It knows exactly how to do that. That's one of its greatest gifts. I'm going to bring you back here to this time and this place, allowing you to feel grounded and alert. and have all the energy to do your day. Was everybody back? I can't quite tell if you're back, Teresa. Are your eyes open? Yes, they are. Okay. So that was really kind of cool. And I'm going to be really honest with everybody. It isn't my favorite induction. And I don't actually even know what to say. So I just said whatever came to me. That's what, there is no script for a spot induction. But it was so much fun for me. Because you guys think I know what I'm doing here. And sometimes I don't know what I'm doing. Because when I did that and I looked at you, it was so much fun because the moment I said, close your eyes, I watched almost everybody's eyes close. And that was because all I did was I used my voice. I said a bunch of silly words that spoke about the spot, that got you somewhat absorbed. And you trusted me and you closed your eyes.
We are really easy subjects.
Pardon? Yeah, that's what's good about it.
Not so easy. I was fighting it because I didn't want to stop observing.
I
So
know.
I was trying not to, but then, oh well, I just give in to it.
That's right. Well, I happened to be watching Kaylee when I said close the eyes, and it was really kind of sweet because there was this slight hesitation, and then there was like, ooh, and I went. So if it hadn't worked, I would have just kept talking, but I didn't have to, right? Because certainly my heart was in it. I wasn't trying to get you to do anything, although I was. I was just, okay, what's going to happen right now? Because I had no idea. So if you decide to use something in the room, don't think that you have to get technical with what you're saying. Just allow yourself to breathe into your body. Allow yourself to just talk about what you're seeing. And that's what I did. I had no idea what I was saying. So I talked because I looked at the frame. I looked at the frame in the room that I could see, and I just spoke about it. Right? So when you're using that kind of an induction, there's no official way of doing it. You use your voice, you use your imagination, you watch your client. And it's a little bit different when you've got 6 people that you're watching. And you're not going to have to do that, right? You're not going to have to induce 6 people to move into a trance state.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
So towards the end, I was experiencing one of the things that I've read about in the notes about you having that like disembodied feeling. What state of trance is that? And like, can you say a little bit more about that?
Sure. Can you just describe a little bit more of what that felt like for you, for me?
I started to feel like it's something that I do when I hit a hypnotic state when I'm doing intuitive work as well. So it's something that I'm used to. But basically it just feels like maybe like a portion of my body was like lighter and like I wasn't identifying with it. And then also all of my body towards the end.
Yeah, and that can be very typical for some people. You'll watch Erickson. If you watch any of the Erickson stuff on YouTube, you'll actually watch him have a person where their whole lower body's in trance and they're wide awake and talking.
Yeah.
I think that's just part of the process of moving inward. So it could be that there is a part of you a little bit deeper. I would say that if you're not feeling a certain part of your body, then you're probably, and I'm only guessing, Kaylee, I would say the part of you is probably getting towards the end of the alpha and into the theta.
Theta. Okay.
Theta is a bit more dreamy. It's where we, we're not so aware of the outside world.
So I can do that kind of in a conscious state. I think it's because of the intuitive work. So like I access that like dreamy kind of like doesn't always make sense. And I could do that while just sitting here with my eyes open if I needed to. I think because I've just practiced it so much.
Exactly. And it could even be that it's a deep alpha, right? Because I mean, all of those particular brainwave patterns have a range of frequency, right? That goes from here to here. So as you move further down from alpha, because right now we're probably all functioning at a higher alpha because we're thinking and we're talking, and especially me right now, I'm moving my hands, right? So as I start to relax a little bit more, then I'm going to move deeper into the lower states of alpha that's heading towards theta. When I get into theta, I'm more in a very meditative state. So, you have the capacity where part of you, was aware, and that's, you can still be in a theta and be aware. It's not meaning that you're gone and you're not aware of what's going on, because you are. So yeah, you're just traveling down through the frequencies of what you're doing.
Cool.
And
Thank you.
Experience, absolutely, yeah.
And what happens if someone gets butterflies?
Butterflies in their stomach, is that what you mean?
Well, I had one lady and she says I get butterflies. Mine just, she said intuitive a little bit. But when I was doing the hypnotherapy on her.
Well, I'm not sure what butterflies means.
Just the fluttering.
Oh, okay, in her heart, in her stomach?
I think so. I'm seeing her again, so. But yeah, I worked with her a few times. But yeah, she said, "Oh, I feel butterflies." So,
I would ask her then, if she says it to you while she's in trance, just keep your voice really at the same level. So just you want to keep your pitch kind of where you were at before she said that. And I might just say to her, well, I might be very simple and say, is that okay? What she says. If she says, oh yeah, it's fine, I'm just wondering what they are, I might just say, are they still there now? Because without knowing what's going on for the person, if it's okay, then it could be that a part of her maybe has had a little bit of a lock on the door of something is now, the key's been turned so there's a potential of something being unlocked. So there's a little bit of, oh my goodness, what's that? On an unconscious level that's physiologically coming out.
she had a tragic situation. And
Yeah, so it could be she's getting a little bit close to something.
Okay.
But you can also assure a person, especially if it doesn't, that's why I'm saying it's better to ask her questions, because if it's okay with her and she wants to stay there, then you can just continue with what you're doing. You can even say, that's probably very normal right now.
Okay.
If it's not comfortable and the person's starting to get a reaction to it, which would be an abreaction, then you can ask them again, is that okay? Or would you like me to bring you out? Now, oftentimes people will say, no, I'm okay. But then you give her choice, especially if she's starting to get a little bit more agitated, just so that she knows she's in control of it. Does that help?
That's good.
Yeah, people will get, many different reactions,
Diane,
Yep.
what does it mean when a person is going into trance and they get a pain right here?
Well, again, it's a little bit like what, Noella is asking about. I don't know. It could be that, I would be curious. I would want to know how they're experiencing the pain, It could, I mean, that is the third eye, right? So it could be that there is something that's, I just need to find the right wording for this. We have many locks and secure bolts on our inner world, right? And if a person's not so used to relaxing, or this is a different relaxed state than they're used to, sometimes what can happen is that a part of us can feel like, oh my God, the lock that I've had on that door feels like I'm losing my grip on the lock. So there could be a pain, right? And I don't know, it could be something else as well. I mean, it could be that their third eye is opening. You know, I don't want to get too esoteric about it. It's just that for you, if you're working with somebody, the most important thing is, you know, what are you experiencing right now? And you can do that with your voice. You can make it normal, you know, and I know that sometimes if, you know, we're new, it's a little bit hard to do, but can you tell me about the pain? What are you seeing or feeling with that pain? And is it okay? You only want to ask one question at a time, right? And let them answer because they are in trance. And then you're watching the person. If the person is getting quite agitated about this pain, then I would very, very quickly say to the person, in my hypnotic voice, not getting too excited about it, as I would say, you can stop this if you wish. And I can very gently bring you out. Because we don't want them opening their eyes and coming out of trance, although we have no control of that. So I try to tell them, I can bring you out of trance really gently. Right? And that gives them a place of choice, because this is so a place of choice. Then do whatever you need to do at that point. But technically, we actually don't know what it means. All we know is something's going on. You know, and I know I've told the other ladies this, but, you know, I had a client who was living with MS. And every time, and we were doing hypnotherapy, that's what she phoned me for. And I would go to her house because she couldn't get out of the house. And every time we did, you know, a trance session, she started hiccuping. Because something inside of her body was reacting to the relaxed state, right? Because she had MS. You know, there's a lot of tension in the body of somebody who's living with MS.
Yeah.
There would be a reaction there. So we don't know. It could be that this person's just maybe never been relaxed before. But we don't want to guess. We just want to be informed by the client and let the client know that they, you know, that they are in choice here. Right.
Right.
And if we can normalize it, which is a very important thing, and how we normalize something is, even if it is like the person whose eyes were wide open and were staring at me and I'd never experienced that before, even inside you're feeling slightly freaked out, like what's going on here, you're really cool on the outside, you're breathing, you're normalizing it by not freaking out too.
Right.
Right. So then what happens is the client gets to come out of trance, you get to have a conversation about it, and they don't leave thinking, oh my God, this is going to happen again next time. I mean, you have no control over what they're thinking, but the more you can make whatever happens normal, the easier it is for the client.
Could it possibly be like you would have to, if you could, like, I mean, you would have to know when they're there. Could it be something that they need like regression on, like what Teresa was saying, if she gets pain here, if it's not the third eye, maybe going into that and saying, well, let's see where it's going to take us?
Well, I'm not going to say no, that you wouldn't do that. What I will say to that is that you have to be aware of what's going on for your client right now. And certainly that could possibly be a question. You know, your clients come to do smoking and now they've got this thing happening. I might not in that moment say to the person, you know, let's go and explore that. Or I might, if it keeps up and it's not agitating the person, I might say to the person, did you want to maybe look at that a little bit?
You know,
say no. I'm just going to be very careful that I'm not just going to go running in there, because I want to understand, or I want to be more present to my client's experience before I decide we're going to do something else.
Yeah, the only thing I'm thinking back now, when she had that, now I realize the whole start of the thing was her heartbreak. So maybe that's why she was having the fluttering. She had severe heartbreak when her husband died. And maybe she wasn't able to open up. She closed down the last 4 years.
Yeah, and we do have, that may be very right on. The only thing I would encourage is that we don't guess. We don't put something on that. What we do is we let that fluttering inform us. Because
Okay.
if we say something like that, not that you would, but if we say something like that, then what's happening is that because we're in an authority position, our word has deep.
Yeah, I wouldn't tell her that indirectly. I'd be thinking that in my mind. And I wouldn't think out loud, but now looking back, I'm thinking, yeah, okay. But mind you, she did well, like after a few sessions. She was sailing again. She was really good.
Mm-hmm. And these to me are just normal, everyday, how this person is doing trance today. So the more I can normalize it, then the more I give it a chance, because you're absolutely right. I remember when I was doing my therapy, my heart would actually hurt, literally ache. And my counselor never got upset about it, never said you need to go to the doctor and give her. Neither. It was just, oh, okay, well, what's that about? How does that feel? Just allowing that to be informed, because probably what I needed to do is that aching needed to happen as my heart started to be able to uncrack, right? Probably was coated in whatever. So I'm not going to put labels on it. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to allow the body to do what the body needs to do. Yeah. And don't forget, I have a different practice than you do as well. I'm a counselor. So as a counselor, I'm more cognizant of allowing my client to experience, as opposed to me telling my client what's going on. I'm not working the way you work as an intuitive. Even though I am very intuitive, I'm allowing that to inform me. I'm not informing my client. Like, I'm not doing intuitive readings. Even though I may say things at times, there is a slight difference. So, you get to do whatever you want in your practice. If it was me in my practice, I would approach it with enormous amount of space to allow that fluttering to either just move, or if it needs to say something and inform the person, then yeah, you can easily say that. Would you, it doesn't want to say anything to you, that fluttering. I mean, that's an option as well, right? So again, I'm not saying it's this, I'm saying, let it tell us what it is. And that way, what happens is that it can move without the client kind of going home thinking it's this or that or something. Because I don't have the expertise to in a way diagnose what's going on for my client. And I'm not saying that's what you're doing, but I'm trying to make that as a real point, is that it's much, much more gentle for everybody if it can inform us. The other thing that happens with that too is a client doesn't tend to attach it to it so much. It actually could be something that just needs to move, and it comes up as a pain here or a flutter there. And it may happen 2 or 3 other times, and that's all it needed to do, and now it's gone, and it's just a part of the process. And the client's not wondering if they've got a heart condition or something like that. I'm being dramatic for a reason. Okay?
Okay.
Great questions, because, and then if it is something that appears every single time, then it's there for a reason, right? So that's when I would probably very much say, the person comes in and says, it's so interesting. I don't feel this until I'm driving in the car and I get here, and all of a sudden I can feel this fluttering in my heart. And then my question would be, can you feel it right now? Yeah, I can really feel it. Would you like to go and maybe explore that a little bit? So again, it's just a sensation, and let's go and see what it has to say to you. It might be exactly what I'm thinking, and it might be absolutely nothing to what I'm thinking. Okay, my friends, it's 12:15, so see everybody back here about 1:30 Vancouver time.
Okie dokie.
Okay.
Okay, thanks a lot, everybody.
All right.
See you after lunch.